So it was inevitable. Binny Bansal simply had to be sacked from Flipkart, the company he co-founded but sold to Walmart. In this instance, of course, he made it easier for them by committing what they called lapses in judgment. But even if he hadn't, he wouldn't have survived for too long, because India's first generation founders are perhaps the most endangered species in the global entrepreneurial ecosystem. A few months back, I had tried to bring this crisis to Prime Minister Modi's attention. Now, since the Prime Minister has a thing for acronyms, I had coined one just for him. DACOIT, D-A-C-O-I-T. That's Digital America China are colonizing and obliterating Indian tech. Just look at how America and China enable their talented founders to raise astronomical amounts of capital while allowing them to retain control via various specially designed financial instruments, structures, incentives, and legal rights. For instance, Jack Ma owns economic benefits of only 8%, but controls Alibaba almost 100% via an innovative structure called Variable Interest Entities, VIEs, which are trusts and contracts listed on foreign bourses. Look at Mark Zuckerberg, he does the same thing via differential voting rights vested in his Class A shares, which allow him to unambiguously control Facebook. Now, as opposed to such aggressive institutional backing, Indian entrepreneurs are trussed up in very, very outdated, archaic laws. For instance, we are not allowed to issue differential voting shares. We are not allowed to issue non-voting stock. We are severely constrained. I would even say we are banned, effectively banned, from issuing and pricing cross-border equity and debt structures, perpetual bonds, warrants, convertibles, puts, calls, tracking stocks, options. We are allowed virtually nothing of all of that. There's also the, monstrously inequitable angel tax. You know what? It forces companies to pay cash taxes. Get this right. Pay cash taxes on unrealized capital gains. It's therefore no surprise that we have become digital vassals. Google and Facebook dominate our search and social media. Walmart and Amazon have invested a piffling, relatively piffling small $25 billion to buy nearly 100% of India, a $3 trillion economy, India's e-commerce market. Look at Tencent, with a market cap which flirts around $500 billion. It's training its sights on Ola, Hike, Practo, Byju's and Make My Trip, while Alibaba, with a fairly comparable market cap, has got Zomato and Ticket New and Paytm, everything in its line of fire. Now, this tragedy, I call it tragedy, is unfolding in broad daylight, because the Modi regime refuses to understand an axiom, namely that ownership and control, I'll say it, ownership and control should be legally separated. And now, as the Binny Bansal saga at Flipkart shows, dacoity has been compounded by a new acronym, SACK, S-A-C-K, that is strategically acquiring control by knocking out the founders. Here's one more acronym for our acronym-loving Prime Minister to grapple with. Now, to begin with, here are a few stark facts as they're available in the public domain. I'm just picking up stuff that is known in the public domain. A young lady works for a few months in Flipkart's call center in 2012. She then moves on to another job. There is absolutely no record of whether she knew or had any engagement with Binny Bansal before she leaves Flipkart. Now, 4 years later, get that right, 4 years later, they meet again and by all accounts get attracted to each other. Now, as consenting adults who are not in the same workplace, please again note that, not in the same workplace, they have, of course, every right to fall in love. Unfortunately, the affair ends badly. Now, well, there is no confirmation. Rumor has it that Binny Bansal tries to pay her off. Now, let's move by another 2 years to May 2018. By this date, Flipkart has been sold to Walmart. The due diligence is on. Regulatory filings are awaiting final approval. At this point, the lady writes a confidential complaint to Walmart in the US, alleging harassment by Binny Bansal. Now, Walmart faces a dilemma. Pristine ethics demand that it should make a public disclosure. But that could jeopardize its Flipkart deal transaction. So Walmart chooses to stay silent. But it appoints a leading US law firm to carry out a discreet investigation. It's also a bit miffed that Binny Bansal did not reveal this affair during the fact-finding phase of the due diligence. But can you really blame Binny Bansal here? I mean, it was a personal affair conducted outside Flipkart. Now, are founders supposed to bear their personal lives during a corporate takeover? Now, since we don't have any granular detail here, I think it's best and only correct to give the benefit of the doubt to Binny Bansal. Now, 2 months later, we are in August 2018. All approvals are through, shares have been transferred, and Walmart now owns and controls Flipkart. Meanwhile, the US lawyers have concluded their investigation. There is no evidence, they say, no evidence of any wrong action by Binny Bansal, except for a lapse of judgment. But, in an entirely disproportionate reaction, he is asked to quit. Why? Because Walmart had just executed the classical SACK, sack, strategically acquiring control by knocking out the founders. But you know what? I have no quarrel at all with this operation. Walmart did what was best for Walmart. And frankly, as I've said, that's the only way it could have been. But I do have a quarrel with any first-generation Indian founder who chooses to stay on as the CEO of his company's new owners. How can a lion, which is what a first-generation founder is, a successful one is, a lion, the fierce king of his turf, suddenly become a lame circus animal dancing and swirling at the whims of a new conductor? If ever any first-generation founder is tempted to emulate what I call Binny Bansal's folly, yes, I call it Binny Bansal's folly, he should read what two iconic entrepreneurs, Ted Turner and Steve Jobs, had to say about their roster. Now, here's Ted Turner. I had no idea I would lose control of CNN when I merged with Time Warner. It was a big mistake to lose control of CNN. I had a sacred trust there, and I let it get away. I was overconfident. I thought I had done such a good job that there was no way they could phase me out. Now, this is what Steve Jobs has to say. Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. In the end, my dear fellow first-generation Indian founders, we can do little about the dacoity on our life's work, except to hope that the Modi regime will wake up and give us a fair deal. But when it comes to getting sacked, S-A-C-K-E-D, sacked, it's entirely in our hands. Just refuse to be or become your buyer's CEO.